But we begin with NDP leader Adrian Dix. A week and a bit after losing an election he was supposed to win. An election that saw a battered Liberal government come back from the nearly dead to win a fourth term. Mr. Dix, good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
When did it hit you? When did you realize that the Liberals were actually winning last Tuesday evening?
Oh, when the first votes come in. I mean, often people talk about early returns, but clearly when they were ahead in 20 seats and we were ahead in 12 seats, it wasn't going to be a good night for us. And, I mean, I always knew the election would be close. I said it on this show dozens and dozens of times, really, that in the end, the Liberal Party, without a Conservative Party in the race, was going to have at least 40% of the vote, and it was going to be close. And it was. And unfortunately, I think for a series of things, which we'll talk about, I guess, in a minute, we didn't run a good enough campaign. I didn't run a good enough campaign. I have to take full responsibility for that.
Why didn't you run a good enough campaign?
I think we focused, two things happened. One, I think we were viewed because of the polls, which I didn't agree with, but they dominated the media coverage of the campaign and the perception of the campaign. We were looked at as the government, so the focus was more on us than on the government during the campaign.
You did hire a chief of staff.
I did hire a deputy minister, of course, because, strangely enough, what happens the day after the election is either you're not the government, in which case you don't need any of that, or you are the government and you have all the responsibilities. So you have to prepare for both eventualities, and we did that. So that was the first set of things. The second set of things is that on key matters, we didn't hold the government accountable enough during the campaign, clearly. They had a very poor record in government, and we didn't make that sufficiently the focus in the campaign. That's just without question. There's the whole discussion of negative and positive. That's one thing. Secondly,
holding the government accountable isn't negative.
I don't think it is, but I think two things mitigated against that. One, we focused on the positive changes we wanted to bring to the province, right? So that was our choice, and we didn't focus enough on making the case for change and then saying what the change would be, and that was a major mistake that I'm responsible for, I think. And secondly, the nature of the campaign was people didn't think the Liberals were going to win, so it didn't matter as much to the media and to the public for a long time in the campaign. But look, that's my responsibility, and I take it. I think the second set of things is we put out a comprehensive, costed, detailed platform that I think was credible. I think it was the only party really that put one out in the campaign. We spent the first 7 or 8 days of the campaign focusing on it. But I think when you talk about all of the issues, it's hard. We didn't put enough focus on the key part of the platform, which was the economy, which we had focused on, right? And the third issue, and let's be frank, the Kinder Morgan issue, I made that decision in the campaign. The way it came out became the focus. It wasn't the issue that was debated. It wasn't the issue we were debating even here when we had the debate in studio. It was how I made the decision about the issue. And when you're explaining those sort of things, it's obviously bad news. And I'm responsible for that as well.
But did you really do it with no consultation of the caucus, without talking to John Horgan, your energy critic?
Well, this is not the case. In fact, on pipelines, we'd spent, I think, 2 years talking about issues around pipelines, Enbridge Northern Gateway and Kinder Morgan, and how you were going to deal with those issues. Here's what I thought, Bill, and this is my mistake, I think, is that I feel that the Kinder Morgan application is going to be a big distraction for our economy and in the debate. It's going to consume enormous amounts of energy over the next few years should they proceed with the application. I think that most people in Metro Vancouver and around BC don't want to see us become an oil tanker port of that size, right? That's my view. And so I thought the election campaign was the last opportunity. Otherwise, we'd have to sit back and let that happen. And I think what was wrong about that from a political point of view was that I was making a decision about government when I should have been campaigning.
And you were also sending a signal to business, particularly the resource business, and I would suggest non-public sector worker unions, that you were the party of no.
Well, but as you know, I'd been working for 2 years to be the party of yes, and that was the other element of it that was frustrating, right?
But that decision changed the perception.
I think that's a fair conclusion, and that I accepted responsibility for that yesterday. We had worked on the forest side. Our plans on forestry were far more pro jobs than the Liberals. On mining, the same. On film and television, the same. And so, yes, I think that we didn't get an opportunity to explain why I made the decision. It became about the decision, and that was my responsibility and my fault. But look, Bill, it was a gutting result. I mean, it was. all of the things that we wanted to do, and I think are very important, the change we wanted to bring. I mean, I was on SkyTrain today, as I am most days, right? And people came up to me, and including people who said they didn't vote, they thought we were going to win, who were devastated. And of course it's devastating. You just think of the key issue, skills training, which is something that I've talked about for 2 years.
You focused on skills training, but you didn't convince people that you were going to create the jobs that those skills were required to fill.
Well, look, what was the record? The Liberals had been losing private sector jobs dramatically with their approach over the previous few years. Their only economic measure was the HST in the 4 years. And so what we were proposing were specific measures in forestry, in mining, in oil and gas. And that our concern was that as these things developed, that we wouldn't have skilled workers in BC, which would both hurt economic development and mean that British Columbians didn't benefit from it. So on the skills training issue, I think the change we want to bring there is one we're going to continue to advocate for with passion. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to implement the sort of the detailed plan that we put forward, and I find that personally devastating.
You said yesterday you'll stay as leader. For how long?
I think right now we want to focus on two things. We have to review the campaign. It was not the ordinary campaign. In 2009, we started that campaign. You want to talk about polls, 18 points behind according to the polls, and we lost by 4. And losing by 4 this time is different. People thought we'd win. And so it was a particularly devastating campaign. So here's what we have to do. I think we have to focus on doing a comprehensive review of that, holding everyone accountable, especially me, for that, 1. And 2, we've got to get ready for a legislative session, because Premier Clark and the Liberals campaigned on a balanced budget. They campaigned that they weren't going to cut health care. They campaigned that they weren't going to cut education. They campaigned that they were going to add to children's services. They campaigned that they were going to add to senior services. So we're going to hold them accountable for what they said and did, including at BC Hydro, of course, where they pushed forward and moved forward and paid forward a big problem for whoever was going to win the election. So our job right now is to do our job, the one we were elected to do by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, hold them accountable, and have a review. The long term, I think, is of course in the hands of NDP members.
But do you want to take the party into the next election?
Look, I just think I want to focus on the present. We've got to take the steps now that will make a victory in the next election for the NDP possible, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
How much do you think the fudged memo to file and the Liberals' constant focus on it in ads cost you? And has your personal brand become permanently damaged by that? The vicious personal attacks on that and other issues, right? On that and other issues that they launched against me in the campaign clearly hurt me, for months and months and months. And I have to reflect on that and whether I should have taken other action to address it at the time. I have to reflect on that. But I think that people appreciate it that I took a different approach. When the Premier had problems in the campaign, I told people not to engage in exactly what the Liberal Party was doing. I think people appreciate that approach. No, I don't regret that. Look, I think one of the issues people talked about was this red light issue. I don't think electoral politics should be about that kind of thing. The Premier apologized for it. I accept her apology. I do think that I should have done a better job holding them accountable for their failed budget record, their failed deficit record, their failed debt record, their failed jobs record, their failed health care record. All of that is what I should have done a better job doing. I heard a number of people say they didn't really believe the budget was balanced, but their reaction was at least the Liberals want to balance the budget. The NDP doesn't seem concerned about it. They're going to run a series of deficits, and they say so up front.
Well, look, what we did was put forward a detailed platform. We said where every penny would come from. Really, it was unprecedented in its detail. But we didn't...
Detailed, perhaps.
Well, I don't agree with that, but I think what we needed to do was communicate it better. I mean, we'd done all this, and it's not enough to do the work. You have to communicate it well in the campaign. We didn't do that.
Calls to NDP leader Adrian Dix, 604-280-9898, toll-free 1-877-399-9898. You're with Bill Good on CKNW News Talk 980, and my phones are open to you. NDP leader Adrian Dix, a week and a bit after a devastating loss in the BC election, and I welcome your calls, questions, comments to him. Alex, good morning.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Mr. Dix. I just wanted to comment that I'm not an NDP supporter, but I don't believe that minor technicalities were what lost NDP the election. I think your core principles are, basically the anti-development, anti-everything new and in the development area. You said no to that. Your history of growing the public sector and actually, frankly, the Sauder report was also, if people read that report, that it would show that NDP was growing public sector much more than it was growing private sector, and that's basically what scared. I did like the fact that NDP didn't talk anything negative. That was one positive thing that I liked about the NDP campaign.
Well, Alex, a couple of things. Here's what's happening in the economy right now under the Liberals since the Premier launched her jobs plan. According to Statistics Canada, we've gained public sector jobs and we've lost private sector jobs. So this is a problem in our economy. I think we absolutely have to grow the private sector. That was at the core of what my campaign was all about. If you look at just the LNG question, which is a great opportunity for BC, I agree with the Premier about that. But if we don't address the skilled workers question, we are not going to successfully complete that project. It actually, you've talked to Jim Prentice, I think, about this. He's made the point strongly in Australia that not having skilled workers raise the cost of the project and cause delays we can't afford. So addressing skills training is what the government can do to promote economic development, and that's what our campaign was about. But again, I mean, clearly, and Alex, you're an example of this, we didn't communicate that well.
Bob, good morning.
Actually, it's Rob. Hi, Adrian. I worked on Selena Robinson's campaign. I think it was great that we had the message for change, but what really bothered me, and I kept waiting all campaign, was every time we said we want change for the better, we failed to remind the public of British Columbia why we want change. We failed to tell them about the record of the Liberals. And it's not being negative when you talk about the facts. I loved your comment in the debate. We're campaigning on the facts, the real facts, Ms. Clark. The Liberals lied. I mean, we allowed them to define the message. We don't have to be negative, and it's not being negative when you talk about the real facts. Yes, the media will accuse us of being negative, but when you give the people the truth, they will decide. And that is what is going to get us in the government the next time. Talk about the real facts. Yes, be positive, but talk about the facts. I'm so tired of these Liberal lies. I worked for 12 years to get rid of these buggers, and I got to wait 4 more years to get rid of these guys now.
I agree with that. I think we could have done a better job presenting that. As I said, I think there were some things that worked against that, including the public opinion polls that showed us in lead, but that's no excuse. We needed to make the case better. I'm hopeful, by the way, in Coquitlam, Millardville, which is the seat gentleman was working in, that Selena Robinson's down about 100 votes. There are, I think, a couple of thousand votes still to be counted. So we'll see what the results are there, and I'm hopeful that there'll be a positive result there because Selena Robinson is just an outstanding candidate for the NDP.
Scott.
Good morning. I voted Liberal, but 2 things stand out to me. Is the first guy who should be fired is the pollster. And second, when you say you didn't get your message out, well, part of that was your problem because, well, the Liberals were going around in the months beforehand saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You kept saying, oh, don't worry, we've got a great platform, but we're just not going to tell you yet. And you waited until the last 30 days when it became a big mess.
Well, we'd been talking for 2 years. It said for 2 years what the main elements of the platform would be, and we laid it out in detail in the campaign. But you're right. I think that a platform that dealt with the major issues facing us across a number of areas, from the economy to healthcare to education, didn't have one message. It had several messages, and we didn't get them out as much as we should. But to say that the Liberal Party, in advance of the election, had laid out its position, they were the government. They put forward, I think, a budget that wasn't sustained on the facts, was a fact-free budget, a balanced budget that wasn't balanced, a budget that said it protected healthcare, didn't protect healthcare. And it's very difficult to prove that in advance of the budget year that you're in. And so we asserted it, and I think people agreed with it. But it is now our job to hold them to account for that, and we're going to do that in this coming legislative session.
But you didn't talk much about what you would do to fix or dramatically improve health care. Can it be improved dramatically within the realities of today's budgeting?
The answer is yes. On prescription drugs, several of the things that I've been proposing for years, the government actually adopted, right, with respect to the generic drug issue.
They're killing the therapeutics initiative.
Well, and that's, one of those things that I find, devastating about the election result, the fact that an agency that has served the public so well in the public interest is being cut really for a political vendetta by the Liberal Party. And it's a consequence of the election that's going to take me, I'm not sure I'll ever get over that.
Should you have made much more of that issue during the campaign?
As you know, Bill, I made much of that issue for 6 years, and we did raise it, and consistently in the campaign it was raised right here in the radio debate on
Yes, it was.
on CKNW, and the Premier's answer was, it was apparent that she didn't know the issue anyway when she answered the question in that debate.
Jane Stirk did.
Jane Stirk did, and I did, but Ms. Clark didn't in that debate. So there are some things we can do on prescription drugs, but here's the things that we need to do, I think, Bill. We need to support the areas of healthcare that are less expensive and provide better service to the public.
Like home care.
Like home care. And that was at the core of our platform. What we said was, look, we're going to have more seniors, and those seniors are going to be more diverse. And if your average life expectancy at 65 is 25 years, then to view seniors as being one group from 65 to 90, is not the case. We need to provide seniors with options and lower cost options than going into complex care. And so investing in home care and home support, investing in community care. Just give you one final example, and this is going to be an issue that I'm going to continue to work on because there's a growth in diabetes, right, is ensuring that people have the ability to avoid complications from diabetes. It's critical for our healthcare system. There are things we can do, and they are the low-cost things. So I'm not pessimistic about it as long as we get our act together.
My thanks to Adrian Dix and to you for your calls.